Okay, so Johnny, we took a trip, just one trip to Universal Studios. How many times have we been to Universal Studios? Just
Just the
that
one
once.
time, right? Just once.
And that was to see Jason, who was living out in California. And
Yep.
we just had a day where we're like, let's go to Universal Studios, let's hang out, right?
Yep.
And obviously, like, I wanted to see, I think we saw the Terminator 2 ride that in time or whatever. That's the one that I really wanted to see. We got to see that. Obviously, I wanted to see the Jaws attraction
Yep.
thing. And then part
We
of
did the
the
ET ride too. The ET.
oh, just a little bit of, do you remember the funny story with ET? I
Yeah.
It was my dream to meet ET, and if anybody knows this, you go and you tell the attendant your name, and he'll write it down so that at the end, when you're off the ride, when you get off the bikes or the basket or whatever, ET will say your name,
Right.
right? So, so it was you, me, Mike, and Jason, right? It was the four of
There
us.
were there were two mics.
Okay, two mics. Okay.
Yeah.
So we go to see this attraction, and it had always been my dream to meet ET. And so I was just overzealous and really picky. As I was talking to the attendant, I'm like, okay, my name is Darin, right? So okay, Darin. I said, not two R's, one R. He's like, okay, Darin. I was like, but not EN, IN. I think it was something like that where I was just being really picky. And it's like, what does it matter what your name is spelled like? It just matters if ET can pronounce it, right? So I think the attendant was like, huh. And so he wrote something else down. So again, my dream, I'm thinking it's going to be fulfilled. We get off the ride. ET mentions, he's like, he waves goodbye. He's like, Mike, Mike, Johnny, Jason, Dion, and my world shattered.
Yeah, that it was
You remember
hilarious for
that?
us though. We thought it was the funniest thing ever, but
We're all like Dion, and just me just sobbing just in the corners because ET said my name wrong. And then I was like, let's go on the right again, guys. Let's go on the right again. Like, no, no, we're done with that. Just kind of left me in just with my tears. Anyway, so we did all that, but then there's another, I think there's another attraction or a line where you go through like the earthquake simulator, or you have the King Kong kind of attraction. And then backdraft is part of this where you get to sit and you get to kind of hold your hands on the bars like you do in the movie, like the rail or whatever, and the fireworks are going off. Fireworks, the pyrotechnics are going off. The barrels are shooting off into the air. You can feel the heat. How was First of all, was Backdraft one of the attractions that really struck a chord with you in that one, or was
yeah.
there?
You know what's funny? Out of all the experiences we had, all the rides we went on, the backdraft ride is the one that I remember the most because of the heat and because of the intensity of the experience and being like, wow, this is awesome. Could you imagine being an actor on a movie set working with flames like this and working in the heat? It was just kind of like it just kind of hit me. And so when I think about that trip, this is the ride that I think of.
Hmm. Okay, well that's cool. And again, it's like backdraft meaning what it means to me. And yeah, people that hadn't seen it before, they don't know what backdraft is. Like they can't tell. It's like fire. So what is this a movie? Is this a TV show? Like they didn't know, but there's just something about sitting watching a movie and seeing an attraction from a movie that means something to you kind of play out. And it felt like, again, you were part of that climax where Steven and Brian are trying to escape the warehouse, or whatever. It
Right.
puts you in there, and I think that's huge, and I think that really helps. So again, it's and yeah, like I said, other people aren't really going to get that, but it's nice having that tie. It's nice having that kind of experience to mean something a little more personally to you. So yeah, Backdraft, the ride, great. Welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Darin.
And I'm Johnny.
And today we'll be covering Backdraft from 1991, directed by Ron Howard, starring Kurt Russell, William Baldwin, Scott Glenn, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Donald Sutherland, Robert De Niro, Rebecca De Mornay, J.T. Walsh, Clint Howard, bunch of people, bunch of great character actors. John, and we wanted to welcome our next special guest. He is one half of the Countdown Pod, one third of the Slashers podcast. He's renowned for his brushes with killer kangaroos, huntsman spiders, and Jason of Binge Movies. He is he is our brother from down under. Paul, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing great. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And that is 100% accurate. Of all the things that you mentioned, by far the most dangerous, and I would not want to come into contact in real life with, is Jason from Binge Movies.
Well, it's good that you live on opposite sides of the earth, right?
Is he worse than a killer kangaroo?
He's definitely worse than a killer kangaroo. If it was a big enough huntsman, that would be a little bit more even, I think.
Wow. Okay. Would you call Jason like your rival? Like I was trying to explain to Johnny like your relationship. How would you describe your relationship with Jason?
Frenemies? I don't know. Like he and I butt heads in a no, look, it's very respectful. All jokes aside, I love Jason. He is one of the great podcasters. His knowledge is encyclopedic about film, and it's
Yeah.
difficult when you go up on his podcast because he's just throwing things at you left, right, and center. You're like, wow, that's very, very impressive. What a read. So that's all the compliments going to pay him because he's a big, big, difficult asshole. There you go. Am I allowed to say that
That
word?
that describes him. I think he'd kind of, yep, I think he'd nod
Yeah.
at that.
It's a
Well, the
badge of
thing that,
honor for him,
yeah, yeah,
bro.
yeah, it's badge of honor. We've had him on, obviously, our podcast, and we know what you're talking about. And I've been on binge movies a few times, and
You
so
have. Oh,
I understand the struggle. But what I love about you two is, yeah, he throws a lot of knowledge at you. Yeah, his brain is like encyclopedic, but you keep up with him. Like that's one of the things that I love about your episodes with Jason is you're just able to match him. Like he jibes you all the time, but you can jibe right back. It's just the first episode, and I apologize because I know there were some before on binge movies. The first time I ever heard you was on binge movies. It was the your Halloween ranking episode.
okay, yeah, yep. We do a Halloween spectacular for about 5 years, where we
Yeah.
covered one franchise or another, and yeah, that was I think the first, although it all sort of blurs after 5 or 6 years of doing it. But yeah, I've
Right.
been on it enough to be on at least once a year and often twice a year. So, and then out of that, we grew the Slashers podcast, which has one season and is about to go into production on season two. So that's exciting as well.
Right. So that's you, Jason, and Megan's back for
Yes,
season. Okay.
she
Because
is. I don't think that's a spoiler or a secret this time around. She is definitely back. She's a fantastic podcaster and just brings a whole different approach to things, in that she's so positive and sees
yeah.
the good in everything, whilst also being critical where she needs to be. She's wonderful.
Right. She's lovely and she's very, very kind and a good friend. We had her on for our You've Got Mail episode.
Nice.
So again, great conversation. And she keeps you two honest, really. I mean, it's nice having that feminist kind of bent with the
Yeah,
two dudes talking about horror movies. So I'll come back to the Halloween because there's a couple of things I want to mention about that episode. But you did Final Destination most recently. You
that's the
did
most recent one. Yep.
A Nightmare on Elm Street. You did the Friday the 13th. You guys did one
Yep.
that I giggled all the way through because Jason has these every season he's got like the highest grossing movies of this year. And I believe it was the highest grossing movies of 2004. And so all of us binge movies fans, we sit down, we download the episode, we stick our headphones in our ears, and then Jason pulls the rug out because he'd already talked about all those movies. And
Yep.
you and him actually did the Ghoulies series,
Yeah,
right?
what an episode. I don't know how that would have played as a listener, like whether you'd been really annoyed, but Jason was determined to go down that road and make it entertaining in that particular way. But for me, it was fine. I knew what I was preparing for. But if I was tuning in, I'd be like, what is this?
Right. So I loved it because that Ghoulies was the one that I was always wanting the two of you to tackle, and so it was just like a dream fulfilled. But yeah, Johnny, it was just hilarious because the whole time, like you're literally expecting them to be talking about Spider-Man 2, and they're talking about Ghoulies like 7, Ghoulies Go to College or something like that. It was so funny. But again, Paul, like you match him great. Like you know your stuff. The
Thank
thing
you. It's very kind.
yeah, Jason is all like I said, he can pull stuff and if he does like a top 10, he'll like have Oppenheimer or Killers of the Flower Moon as his top, but you'll have like stuff like Infested or
Yes, I will.
which is great because I think you need that everyman type quality as well as I want to call it highfalutin movies, right? But it's the critic darlings. You need a good
Yeah.
mix of those things. So that's what I mean by matching him. You've got a very encyclopedic knowledge of horror, of that genre. And one of the things that I love about your reviews, I just listened to your Black Bag episode. I never know where you're going to come down on a movie like that. I want to say, if I say unpredictable, that's going to sound kind of negative in a way, but
No,
I
no,
don't mean
not at all.
that.
I get it.
So explain to us like how did you become like a film critic, a film aficionado? How did you start the Countdown Pod, all of those things? Again, with the Halloween episode, that was the first time I'd listened to you and you made me laugh. I believe you got into Halloween 4 and you guys started debating Loomis's like his credentials, burning down a hospital in Halloween 2 and killing like babies and killing like 3 or 4 babies in the hospital. And you guys started laughing and you said something that made me fall in love with you. You stopped and you said, "I'm not laughing over the death of babies." And that just killed me. But again, when you
Thanks
were
again.
talking Halloween 3, and Jason goes in this whole thing about you've got like a degree, right? And he tries to explain to you the physics and the meaning of Halloween. I thought that was so funny. So again, that just made me fall in love with you. It made me want to listen to Countdown Pod. You and Wayne, again, a great partnership. But yeah, explain to us the Countdown Pod and your hit. How did you become that film aficionado? How did you start the Countdown Pod? How long have you and Wayne been friends? Just the whole Paul spiel. If you could give us that, that'd be great.
Sure. Look, I don't want to bore your listeners to tears, but so I'll try and give you the Cliff Notes version. But Wayne and I have been friends since we were 15 years old, around about the time actually that this movie came out. We would have been that age, so that we're going to talk about today. And we became friends purely on the basis of another Kurt Russell movie, Tango and Cash, where one of us said "foobar" in the classroom that we were in, and the other one was
Wow.
like, I won't say the words in case we're not meant to swear on this podcast, but effed up beyond all recognition. Like, yeah. And it was almost like that Jerry Seinfeld joke, like, hey, you like cola? I like cola. We should be friends. You like cherry cola? We'll be best friends. And it was almost that moment played out in real life
Yeah.
for 15-year-olds as we were at the time. And look, all the way through to when we started this podcast, which was 25 years after that moment, almost,
Wow.
where I had had a child and I'd stopped watching movies. This is a long-winded way of getting there. And I started listening to a lot of podcasts instead, because you can put down a podcast, I find, at any point in time, but I find it very difficult to stop a movie 15 times during watching it, because baby's crying, baby needs to feed, baby needs to be changed, etc., etc. So I got a bit frustrated with watching films and did this instead. And basically what then I decided was, well, I'm listening to all these podcasts. I think I can do something like this. I just need a willing participant to come with me. And that ended up being my best friend of 25 years. And so the countdown was born, which was just a topic to do with movies or television, and then counting it down from 10 to 1 and basically arguing with each other about who's right and why we put it in that order. And we wanted it to be comedic and not serious and not sanctimonious. And we just have fun with it. And I think we've achieved that. Hopefully we've achieved that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the genesis of it. And then we became quickly a weekly podcast, and then we divided about halfway along the movie reviews from the countdown, so people could choose what they wanted to listen to, and a little less editing emphasis on me on a Sunday night and a Monday night to get things out on time. And yeah, look, it was a lot of fun. We hit some highs. You know, all the arguments are always exaggerated. No one was ever really upset with each other. I don't think we never walked away from a recording going, we're not friends anymore.
Right.
Obviously, it was all in good nature, probably exaggerating a little bit of how we would go about things. So yeah, that's basically the genesis of the podcast, and we still do it occasionally, as I was mentioning off mic, that sort of once a month or so we'll get together and record. But it's just for fun and just to get together, really hang out, and then if the listeners want to come along for the ride, which so far they have, then that's great.
Yeah. So again, 500 episodes. Just recently you hit that. That's huge. A huge congratulations to you and
Thank you.
Wayne for doing that. And just I wrote down a list of the type of, because again, when we have our guests on, we adore our guests, and so we want our guests to also start adoring you. And so I wrote down just a kind of a sample of all the episodes you've done. Out of 500, you've done like top 10 westerns, crime thrillers, villains, war movies, feel-good films, gross-out comedies, most quotable movies, most phoned-in performances, scenes that made us crap our pants, unsexiest sex scenes, cover songs, greatest bands of all time, characters we'd most like to marry, films we'd least like to watch with our mums. Again, just a wide range. You were
Yeah.
telling us off camera. How did you come up with the topics? Because, and also you didn't just do countdowns. I guess that would get exhausted. You also do movie reviews and things like that. But
Yeah.
how did you come up with the topics each week?
A lot of sitting around. Initially, it was easy. I mean, a lot of people just thought, our friends included, thought, well, they'll do 5 or 10 of these, and it will fade away like a lot of podcasts do. And I'm sure the two of you know how much work goes into such a thing behind the scenes. So we started too broad with topics, top 10 comedies. Okay, but then we realized as it sort of picked up a bit of momentum, and it probably took a year or so before we found a listenership that we were happy with, that we were sort of like knew it wasn't just us and our mums and a well-meaning friend or three.
Yeah.
But once we did have that wider sort of pull and a bit of an audience, and we won a couple of awards for the show, we realized, oh, we could probably sink a bit of money into this. We could probably make a bit of money instead of spending it all as well. And then from there, we went back and sort of broke up things like top 10 comedies into gross out comedies and
Yeah.
teen coming of age comedies and things like that. So we initially, the first 250 episodes probably wasn't hard. And we used to tie the countdown to the review that we were doing that week. So if it was a sci-fi thriller, we'd somehow work in an angle of a sci-fi thriller for the countdown. If it was I don't know, a dramatic comedy, we'd try and find a way in around that. And then eventually that got too hard, so we abandoned that idea. It's just whatever countdown we wanted to do with whatever we were reviewing. And then beyond that, we expanded out to count down anything in a top 10. So you mentioned like rock bands or pop songs, which was actually one of our most downloaded episodes ever.
Mm.
Top 10 pop songs of the 80s, I think it was. And not that I think we're as qualified to talk about music as we are about, both of us can play the guitar, but Wayne's exponentially better than I am. But apart from that, there's no musical talent whatsoever. And whereas films, we just consumed a lot. And I'd studied a little bit of it, but not at university, but not in a film degree or official kind of way, just units here or there. So to answer that earlier question, which I didn't, I now realize it was just sheer bulk of, we watched a lot of stuff, a lot. We used to go to the movies, Wayne and I, once a week in this era when we were 17, 18, 19. We'd see everything that came out. We were pretty non-discerning. So the 90s in particular, this was our era. And then you start doing movie podcasts, and I was watching 200, 250 films a year, with the exception of 2019, where I had a bit of a movie watching challenge, watched 700 movies in 1 year.
Whoa.
It was madness.
Well, it's that the thing is, like, you have an opinion, right? And you're very strong on that opinion. That's what you look for. So even if you're not as learned as like the ultimate film scholar, if you have an opinion and
Absolutely not.
you're very strong about that, you come off as very knowledgeable, which is again what you come off. The thing with you and Wayne, there's that friendship. First of all, and I mean this as a total compliment, you have Wayne's unreal laugh, which
Yes.
when you hear it for the
takes a
first
bit.
time, yeah, you hear it for the first time, you're like, is that real? And then you realize, oh, it is, and you get addicted to it. I think so. Again, passing that on, I think Wayne just has a great laugh. You guys both have again a great camaraderie, and so it's kind of like what Jonny and I do. It's you're two friends sitting down talking about movies, and you're very strong-willed on it. You are passionate about the things that you love. That's what makes the Countdown Pod that continues to make it great, I think, and that's why you have 500. That's why you did your 500th episode. You had so many emails, so many voicemails about people that just adore you guys and were just kind of heartbroken that they wouldn't be hearing you every week, even though you have your back catalog of like 500 episodes. But you
That's
going over your
incredibly
history.
kind. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Oh, you're
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
It's easy to be kind about stuff that you love, right? But you going over your history about your friendship with Wayne and how you came up with the podcast, to me and Jonny, that sounds very familiar. Jonny, how long have we known each other?
Something 30 something years, I think, right? Gotta
I
be at least in the 30s.
I think 92 was our first play together
Wow.
Yeah.
when we became, so that's 1 year off from you and Wayne, right? And it was just the same. I don't know if Jonny and I had that same foobar moment, but yeah, talking to Jonny and getting to know him, did we had that kind of same experience, didn't we?
Yeah.
So
Nice. It's awesome.
yeah, again, very, very great. I mean, what was that? How would you describe our friendship, Jonny, over 30 years? How would and Paul talking about going to see movies like every week together. That's gotta strike close to home, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what we did as well. Not only in the theaters, but at each other's houses, and we'd go out. We would binge movies all night long sometimes, and just like watch 3 or 4 movies in a row until the sun came up. That was kind of what we would do, and so we that definitely hits close to home. Yeah.
And especially 90s movies. So again, Paul, it seems like you're right in our, yeah, you're
Yeah.
speaking our language here.
What a story, or similar kinds of stories.
Yeah, and it's great. It's great having that shared experience. Also with NostalgiaCast, I had that same experience as you. I think it was about 2016. I was just burned out on movies, and I didn't. Again, movies have been my whole life. I was raised by a single mom, and so movies were kind of my babysitter. We'll talk about
Mm-hmm.
a little more of that in a little bit, but so that's where I started getting my knowledge about movies and my love for that. And then again, 2016, I just started losing it. Like there wasn't stuff for me, and so just like you, I started listening to podcasts and that got me excited, and I was like, oh, like I think I could do this. I think I could
Yep.
talk movies on a podcast. Could I possibly get to join me to talk about movies. And first person I thought of again was Jonny, because we started basically our movie going like love in the 90s, and we started that together. So again, you talking about that, we know exactly how you feel. I love that. That's kind of a similar experience with all three of
And
us.
I also play guitar, so there's that too.
Hey.
We should just have you on as a, since you're not doing Countdown Pod anymore, we should just have you on as a co-host again.
Wow.
As a
It's amazing how
co-host.
similar the stories are. Like, geez,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. So is that you watched a lot of movies. Is that something that your parents instilled in you? How did you become like a movie lover?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Did they still, as far back as I can remember, which includes making the transition from Betamax to VHS. So I'm
Right.
just old enough that we had like a Betamax video recorder or video machine that for a couple of years. And I remember the transition too. And by that stage, it was, go down, get out a new release, but also get out 5 old ones to watch and get them for the week. And would sit there and work our way through them. It wasn't like I was a very outdoorsy kid. I played a lot of sport and spent most of the day out and about, either riding bikes around the suburbs or cricket, which I won't bore you and your listeners with, but a very English sport during summer and the like, and then played football, Australian rules football, not NFL, although I love NFL. It's a great sport.
Hmm.
Yeah, but otherwise, at home at night, it was, or in the evening or afternoon, late afternoons after the sun's going down, it was like, okay, stick a movie on, let's watch a movie. Often as a family, but sometimes it's just, oh, I'm moving into sort of my thing of what I wanted to do. And I'm the elder of two kids. And my brother would go off to grandparents and my parents would go out, and I'd have the house to myself from a relatively early age, 12 or 13. And yeah, I would just watch 2 or 3 movies of a night. So that's where it sort of all began for me.
Wow. Yeah, again, very, very, a lot of us kind of had that same experience, it seems like, when you do a podcast. Not everybody, you know what I mean? But it's always fun finding those people that's just like me, and you can point at them. And that, I don't know if that, maybe that's psychologically or subliminally, that's what comes across listening to you and Wayne talk, or whenever you show up in anybody else's podcast. It's just, you can feel that love that you have for movies and that appreciation
Yeah.
that you have. That's
Oh, thank
is
you for
would
sure.
would you say that's something that maybe only film aficionados have? They have like a sixth sense for guessing that about other people. What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, that idea of why is it that you keep listening to some podcasts that you sample and try, and you don't listen to others, and maybe that's a real element of it. Like,
Hmm.
without the passion, I think for anyone who's doing a podcast, who puts the time and effort in and buys the equipment and tries to make it sound half decent or even good, if at all possible, and then on top of that does the research and the prep, and on top of that then goes and watches all the stuff, especially if I know you're looking back, obviously NostalgiaCast, but if you're doing something current, you're also watching everything that's coming out now to be able to talk about it and offer your thoughts and commentary / criticism thereof, or to shout it from the rafters when it's an amazing film. So there's a lot of time and effort that goes in. So I assume most people who do this are really passionate about it, but some are going to strike you on a particular chord or level that perhaps other podcasters don't, for whatever reason that may be.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask you one more question, and then we'll go into our histories of Backdraft. But there seems to be a trend recently with people that are either just new to movies or starting to watch movies. I'm wondering if you're picking up on this too. But they don't seem to want to engage with movies made before a certain time. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah.
because they're just too lazy or they don't have respect for older movies. But as somebody who's watched movies basically his whole life, like Jonny and I have, something that we've noticed and something that we've talked about with Jason before, it's like it, you need to watch more movies. Like there's the movie you watch now is going to be fed from like hundreds, if not
Yep.
thousands, or of movies that have come before it. And so if you don't have that knowledge of previous movies, some of the stuff that you watch isn't going to hit the same. You know what I mean? I mean, is that something you agree with? Are you
Yeah.
noticing that, especially on film Twitter?
I do. And I don't judge, though, too harshly, because I think of myself. And I have to admit that go back before 1970, which is before I was born, just to clarify. uh, and I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of those films in the 60s and the 50s. I've watched the big ones. I've been through the IMDb top 250, and anything that's in there I've watched. And some of the other highly recommended ones I've watched as well. But I could not say with good conscience that oh, I got it all. I've seen it as many proportional films from the all the way back, just the
Right.
20s down through until I'll probably say the 80s is when I could say, okay, I've seen most of everything that has an appeal to me moving forward from there. So I kind of get it if a 25-year-old is saying, films before 2000, they're hard for me to watch. I don't appreciate it the same way. But when you've got parents, like I subject my child to watching some of these classic films, if you were like the Back to the Futures and wearing a Goonie shirt today, you can't quite see it. And the Goonies, the Goonies is one of her favorite films
Yeah.
of all time, my daughter. So yeah, if you don't have a strong older figure in your life, I won't say parental, it could be a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or just an older friend of the family who's getting you into these films, it's probably harder, or it takes more motivation to really seek these things out for the younger podcaster, shall I say?
Right, right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's just, John, did you have any comments on that about
Well,
how the state
I
of
had a
movies
similar
today?
experience where like I got to a point where I got bored with what was coming out like currently the modern day films, and so I
Mm-hmm.
started reaching back into the archives. Like, okay, what's the 1920s got? What's the 30s got? What are the 40s got? And you start watching those ones. You start going, oh, those are pretty good actually, and you start to really appreciate what they were able to do back then. So I think it's important as well to have a rich catalog of movies that you can pull from and kind of like you can learn things from every different era. So it's important to watch
For
them
sure.
all.
For sure.
So you guys, Paul, you and Wayne also did like a top 10 movies of the 70s, I believe,
Yep.
where Johnny and I did a 70s season. And it was fascinating watching those because basically it was Spielberg and Lucas and Scorsese and Coppola and
Coppola. Yeah.
De Palma taking stuff that had been done because they movies had hit a rut, right? In the 50s and 60s, like people weren't going to see the big blockbusters. TV was a big thing. And so the movie brats came out of the woodwork and took all the movies that they loved, that they grew up on from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and they were giving them new life. So Jaws is just a reiteration of stuff that had come before, like monster movies that had done before. Mean Streets and Goodfellas are just like a repeat of mobster movies from before, right? The Godfather was the same thing. And then you hit the 80s, which you're very familiar with because a lot of the slashers and a lot of the video nasties came out during that
Yep.
time, which is what the slashers is all about and why that makes that such a fun, informative series. And then you move into the 90s, which again, all of us really kind of our minds expanded because of that. It seemed like in the 90s there was new life given to movies, and that's why you look back on it now and you have like the Kevin Smiths and the David Finchers and the Spike Joneses in it. There's just a lot of real voices. So
Hmm.
movies are very cyclical. But with the 90s, again, we've covered the 90s before, and for this season, we're talking to you off air. We wanted to revisit the 90s again, but we wanted to do it in a different kind of way. So Johnny and I came up with a bucket list season, which Johnny and I have these movies that we weren't able to tackle the first time that we've always wanted to talk about. So I told Johnny, let's make a list of movies we really want to talk about. If we have guests, I want to give them a list of stuff and tell them if there are any of these movies that you've always wanted to chat about. If there's a movie on here that you haven't seen that you want to cross off your bucket list, let's talk about that. And I gave you a list of movies,
Mm-hmm.
and Backdraft was the one that we decided on. And again, chatting with you, I didn't want to like get everything that you are with Backdraft before we actually talked about it. But if you could explain to us why, like, first of all, like 90s movies, why you think they meant something more to you than other movies, and then why Backdraft? Why did you pick this as like your bucket list conversation?
Can I just break out here to say that because I'm on Zoom, which is the first time I've used Zoom on this computer, it's taking over my mic and adjusting my levels in Audacity where I'm recording.
Uh-huh.
So I hope it works at your end because it's going to be painful and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Sorry.
Okay, no, you're fine. We'll work.
Okay.
We'll work with it.
I have a pretty strong theory, guys, that what you get to in your adolescence, in that sort of sweet range between around about 12 and 16 or 17, makes the most indelible marker of you in terms of your taste of things.
Hmm.
So most of the time, by the time someone hits 18, and certainly 21, where in the US you are deemed to be legally an adult, what you like has been set. So if you like horror films, you'll have seen a bunch of them that made an imprint upon you, that made a real splash for you at the time. If you're into romantic comedies, then the same thing will happen. It's same for genres of music. Like people like what they like by they're that age, and then they pursue those kinds of things moving forward. As you were saying, Johnny, you might have moments or an epiphany at times of I need to expand my knowledge or my interest in things beyond this and try different things. And you'll hear a lot of people in this day and age now talk about foreign films like, oh, there's this whole other thing beyond, English speaking language films that I should go and watch because there's some really great films out there. And I had that moment probably when I was around about 30 years of age or so, and then started watching and consuming as much as I could, particularly Asian cinema, which there are some remarkable films that are made from that particular continent, which sounds like a stupid thing to say, but yeah, I know people don't like subtitles, but whereas I went to embrace them, and I was just watching one last night actually. So it's all which a long-winded way of saying. So this was my era, this period here, which defined. And so yes, horror is probably my favorite genre, but this kind of action films, and this is more an action drama, obviously with Backdraft, but it pinged right on my radar at exactly the right point in time for my age that I was, and made a real mark for me. So I won't play my cards close to my chest or anything. I love this film, flaws and all, and it is flawed. There are numerous flaws in this film. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I can look past those flaws because some of the elements of it really strike such chords with me that I would seek out films like this or around this for decades to come.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, Jonny, what about you? And Backdraft, what's your history?
Honestly, I can't remember the first time I saw it. I want to say it was with my family, but I know I saw it with you at some point. I don't remember. They kind of like mixed together. I'm not quite sure when I first saw it, but I do remember liking it, and I don't really remember revisiting it anytime recently. So this has been, it's been decades since I've seen it the first time I saw it. So it was kind of fresh and for me as well.
Awesome. Well, my history with it, the reason that it was on my bucket list is this movie is very important to me because this is the movie that made me fall in love with film scores. And
Yes.
that sounds weird because I've been watching movies for what, 10 years before this. So I was very hyper aware of Jerry Goldsmith. I was very hyper aware of John Williams. But the thing with John Williams is that he had themes. And so I'd recognize themes like Indiana Jones or Star Wars or Jaws, things like that. But watching Backdraft, I don't think I'd heard the name. Maybe I was familiar with the name Hans Zimmer before, but it didn't hit me what kind of composer he was until I was watching this movie. Again, a little bit of a side note. When I was growing up, again, I was an only child. My mom was a single mom, raised me by herself, so she was working to support us. So I would watch movies. Movies were my babysitter. There were basically four ways that I'd watch movies. Number one, my mom would rent movies and just leave me what she was doing her Tupperware parties, just sitting me down in front of the TV, and I'd watch
Mhm.
two movies and be fine. And then she'd come home and I would just be, just still watching the movie. She would go to take me to the movie with her. We had a family friend named Veda who for some reason really liked me as a kid. So she would take me to movies. Or my mom would drop me off to watch movies and then go run some errands and then come back. Backdraft was one of the ones that she dropped me off for. And so I went. I didn't expect anything from it. I saw the trailers. I think the trailer famously uses the James Horner Glory closing theme or whatever for the trailer, and so that made me want to
Okay.
see it. And yeah, I was interested in the fire stuff. Like I like the acting. Kurt Russell was great to watch. But at the end of the movie, something took over my brain and kind of changed me. Like the best movies, and Paul and John, you'll probably agree, are the movies where you sit down and you walk out a different person.
Mm.
And yeah, we'll talk about the flaws of Backdraft. It's a very flawed movie, but it still means a lot to me because the music score was telling me a story. It wasn't just a theme. Hans Zimmer he has the Zimmer sound. This is when he was first becoming big, but he has two themes in the movie. He has the brothers theme, which is kind of a piano theme, and then he has the firefighter theme or the Fighting 17th theme, which is a very trumpet heavy, kind of heroic, kind of brassy theme, right? And so whenever they would play that theme with the firefighters, you'd feel heroic. You'd feel the call to action. It's very inspirational. It kind of makes you want to be a
Yeah.
firefighter. And then with the brothers, and we'll talk about it, I think the brothers theme kind of sells the relationship more than the actual actors selling the relationship, maybe. But at the very end, again, we go through the whole thing, and we're assuming that you've seen the movie. It's obviously a rite of passage. The movie starts with Brian losing his father. Brian and Steven lose their father, also played by Kurt Russell, which I thought was funny. And then you go through the whole movie. Kurt Russell as Steven, he's like the kind of the brash, the brother, the big brother, and so he's hard to get along with. Toward the end of the movie, he basically instills in Brian like a family passion again for the job, right? For traditions, things like that. And so when Steven passes on and Brian is sitting there in the 17th firehouse trying to decide if he's going to carry on the family tradition, Zimmer starts a cue that again changed me chemically. I think on the soundtrack he calls it "Show Me Your Fire Truck," but it's this very triumphant theme. It shows Steven like accepting his destiny, I guess, as a
Yep.
firefighter. He climbs in the fire truck, he runs off, he tells the kid you're doing it wrong, and then it shows Steven like thinking, and it cuts to the shot of the Chicago or whatever. But Zimmer does a thing where he mixes the Fighting 17th theme with the Brothers theme, and he overlays them together. And I just remember hearing that and just thinking, wow, this movie is telling me that the brother, he's carrying on the tradition as a firefighter and it's melding together as a theme. And I hope I'm making sense.
Yep.
It told a story. I would just thought movies and music were themes, but this movie told me a story. And it changed me forever. This is my favorite music score of all time. Zimmer's my favorite composer. Again, no shade to John Williams or Jerry Goldsmith or James Horner, any of the others out there, but Zimmer just speaks to me, and he always has, and it's because of this movie. Paul, did you have any thoughts on Zimmer's score for Backdraft?
Well, as you were speaking there, DWI, I literally had chills. Literally. Okay. If you could see my arms, you'd see the hairs on them are standing up because you did that more justice than I could ever hope to do. But you described so perfectly what I think about this score as well. It is next level. It is one of my absolute, it may not be my favorite score of all time. It's very, very close up there. If you were going to ask me to give my five, and we did do a top 10 movie soundtrack scores, and You Go, We Go from this particular soundtrack, which is my favorite piece of them all, though Show Me a Fire Truck, Fighting 17th. Even The X Is Here is another moment where Steven comes back and is really upset. He's worried about what's going on, and he just goes back to his ex-wife, and she takes him to bed. It's a very chaste, very, they're all their clothes are on. There's nothing sexy about it. It's just two people connecting at a level of support. And that little piece of 1 minute music, for me, became almost the romantic soundtrack score of my life. Like when I feel something for someone, my wife, that score will resonate in my head almost literally. It sounds kind of corny to say, but it's right there for me. And you giving the list of films to do and then me choosing Backdraft after I watched it earlier in the week, it's been nonstop on my playlist at work, just listening to it. When you confirm what time we're recording this recording, I literally was listening to it all.
Awesome.
And I agree, Hans Zimmer is my favorite composer for all the reasons that this film brings out. I went and saw him live in concert with his. It was absolutely one of the best 3 concerts of my life I've ever been to. It was stupendous. That's a big, crazy word to use, but he is very, very special to me. And when I see his name on a soundtrack, I'll probably give the film a go, even if I have zero interest whatsoever in what the film is telling me. But I have all the interest in a film about firefighters being heroic and saving people. So thank you for saying all that. You did it much, much better than I could. It was so perfect.
Oh, I appreciate that. Again, just telling you that my brain again was just changed forever. And again, this isn't my favorite movie by any means. This might actually be my epitome of soundtracks that I love better than the movie. Like if you were to make a list of stuff like that. But again, music scores and composers do have this strong kind of primal pull that nabs you. You're saying Backdraft isn't your favorite. Let me ask you though, what do you have a movie, Paul? And then I'll ask Jonny this too. Do you have a movie that did make you fall in love with music scores? Is that your favorite movie? I mean, what would be some of the titles that you would think music was it changed you chemically like it did? This one did me.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned them all, the people who would do it, but the Basic Instinct soundtrack by Jerry Goldsmith is right up there for me. Like
Wow.
that film is obviously controversial for a number of different ways. It's one of my favorites of all time. But it's the score. I bought that on CD soundtrack, same as I bought Backdraft on CD soundtrack, and had them for years. In fact, my wife made me clean out my CDs like less than 2 years ago. So because you can just obviously get them at the touch of any button you want to these days.
Right.
So I held that for 30 years, that particular soundtrack. And also, it's probably a cliche, but for me, the whole Indiana Jones trilogy of films, that theme, and even all the variations that John Williams weaves through it, particularly coming into The Last Crusade, obviously only a couple of years before Backdraft, that final piece where they've survived and they go swanning off into the sunset, of course, with the tune playing, but every other element that's been woven through that particular last track, which is about 12, 10, 11 minutes long, and it goes into and over the credits. There was no better way to end that trilogy. And I'm still sad to this day that they darkened those films by having two further films, which were not a patch on the original three.
Oh, they made two more after that? I didn't know that. I thought it ended with Last Crusade.
It should have done.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What about you, Johnny? Are there any particular movies that made you fall in love with music scores or notice music scores for the first time?
Well, for sure, yeah. First of all, I want to say I agree with you. I think the score in this movie is great. However, I was thinking it was James Horner the entire time because I know that he uses James Horner a lot. So I kind of assumed it was James Horner. And then at some point I went, wait a minute, this is someone else. And so I heard the bagpipes and went, oh, it's Hans Zimmer. There it is. But anyway, yeah, I think it's great. It's well done. It does evoke the right emotion at the right times. And so I appreciate that. As far as scores that I think are great or recognizable. Obviously, there's the big ones, the Star Wars, the Indiana Jones. Those are all really good. I'm a fan of John Williams, but I don't, I get bored with them sometimes. I do like, I've said before, I love Braveheart score and I
Mm.
love Last Mohican score. I think those are two that
Yes.
have just
Yeah.
amazing scores. But one that changed me is There Will Be Blood. I walked out going,
Wow.
"What was that?" Like that was so different and so was I was not expecting that. I left feeling changed after hearing
Is that
that.
the guy from Radiohead who did that one?
Yeah,
Yes.
Johnny
Yeah.
something. What's his last name? Johnny something.
Oh, I thought you would just know that. I
I
can't
don't know
remember
his
his
last
name
name.
either. But the score is really good. I know what you mean.
Oh
It's
yeah.
kind of yeah, it's kind of like atonal in a way. It kind of calls attention to itself. Um, yeah, Johnny, you mentioned Greenwood. Is it Johnny
Yeah,
Greenwood?
Johnny Greenwood. That's it.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
nice. Yep.
I want to get that out of the way. The nerdy thing with the backdraft score too is that I think Horner had used Ron Howard had used James Horner before for Willow, obviously a couple other movies, but when I mean he heard the score for I think Black Rain, and so that's what got his attention on Zimmer, and so his initial conversations with Zimmer like I think they had a miscommunication because like Zimmer wanted to do a heroic theme, but Howard wanted him to do like this kind of introspective, kind of dark score that Black Rain had. And Zimmer was like, that doesn't suit the tone of Backdraft at all. Like you want to do like the heroicness of these firefighters. You want to hit the horns with. I want to do a big brassy kind of heroic, kind of corn gold type score for this. And they kind of fought over that. So even though the score I think is perfect and it's just works its magic on me, that's why they didn't work again together until 2006 for the Da Vinci Code, which they struck up a
Right.
conversation and did that. And then I think Zimmer became Howard's go-to guy after I think Horner had retired or done some other things. But again, the Da Vinci Code is probably that's interesting. The Da Vinci Code is probably my second choice for a score that actually is better than the movie. Like that score I think makes that movie tolerable. Da Vinci Code is not. I don't know. I don't enjoy that. It's just a bunch of like. It's just super serious about silly stuff, and it's just rubs me the right way. But the Zimmer score is very, again, classical. It seems like, and it's a gorgeous score and all that. But again, we could talk about Zimmer all day. The
Good.
I kind of want to see though into again the accompaniment for the action scenes is great, but kind of like funneling this down. The music score is my favorite part about this movie, but then my next favorite part is the action
Hmm.
or the firefighting sequences. I know that Howard in all his movies, he has his theme is basically family, right? If you look at any movie like Apollo 13, it's about family. It's not only Lovell's family, but it's about NASA works as a family. You look at Parenthood, obviously all about family. Backdraft, the firefighters are family, stuff like that. And so that the themes definitely tie in there. But I really think that Howard wanted to stretch his muscles by doing action and trying to make this work. And the thing that's great, I'm trying to find a quote by him on okay. This is a quote from Howard. He says, the fire was all in camera. We had gas burners and fire retardants and a team of 10 Chicago firefighters around us at all times with extinguishers at the ready. And they needed to move in at times. No matter how well we planned, we just never knew when the fire was going to get away from us. And it did on occasion. But the firefighting sequences, I want to get your opinion on this, Paul and Johnny. They're very visceral, and you feel the heat, I think, and you feel the danger, even though Steven is running in there without a gas mask, kind of being the cowboy, right? But Paul, what do you think about is the action, are the fire sequences another big selling point with this movie for you?
Yeah, again, you've nailed it. And I hate to be so boring just to agree all the time, but that is the second reason why. This is the first film in Hollywood history where the main cast were credited as stunt performers on the film. So they literally put them in there and film. That's why it is all in camera, because you've got Kurt Russell and what am I ranking? William Baldwin, not Stephen Baldwin,
Yeah.
and Scott Glenn and the like. They're all actually in there, and the flames are around. Obviously, they try and keep it as safe as they can, but you see that you see the sweat glistening off their on their faces, particularly on Stevens, because as you say, doesn't wear a mask, and it looks like they're in danger, and that's what sells this particular film so well. In every one of those sequences, some of those explosions and the flames are rolling over them, or they're jumping through them. I was even now, having watched the film 10 times, and the last time most recently this week, I was still jaw dropped through those sequences. I have to say, it's incredible.
There's just, I want to call it Tom Cruising it. There's just something about putting your actors in the middle of this action that really sells it. It sells the danger, it sells the physicality of all that. The the note that I have here, we'll talk about like the plotting, obviously, but the watching the visceral spectacle of it, especially at that climax when Brian finds out that it's actually Adcox that's been setting all these fires, right? And he goes to confront him, and Steven and Axe and Brian are all arguing on that
That
rooftop, the
roof.
warehouse
Mm-hmm.
that's coming down. The music that kicks in, it's from that moment on until maybe the end of the movie, it nothing about that last 30 minutes fails for me. That last 30 minutes I think is perfect. And it's because it's a mix of everything. The score obviously is very arousing, it's very dangerous, it's exciting. The acting, the actors are selling it because they're performing, they're doing their own stunts. The stunt work and the pyrotechnics are selling all of it. That warehouse, when you see the floor like break away from Brian's legs,
Mm-hmm.
feet as he's running, is like, whoa, that is really cool. They're really selling all that. But that whole thing, I think, works. And again, with the physical, you're looking at matte paintings and the in-camera effects, and you're looking at miniatures, all of that. That is movie magic. That whole climax in that warehouse, I don't have
It
any
is.
problems with it. And that's like you and Wayne talk about this stuff. I think you just mentioned in Black Bag that it's like, don't go see this in it. You don't necessarily need to see this in a theater, right? I think Backdraft, these fire sequences, and again, I remember watching it in the theater, like this is big screen worthy. This stuff works. And that's what you kind of want to see from you want to experience something you never experienced before. Paul, what do you think about that?
100%. Again, nailed it. This is one of those films which you see on the biggest screen possible. I realize, 34 years after its release, you're not likely to get it at your local Cineplex again to see, but on the biggest TV or the biggest projector you can at home, it's worth every inch that this film that you can get to see those pyrotechnics going off, those explosions, those action sequences, as you say. What about you, Jonny? Is it similar for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that I feel like the fire is a character in the movie. Like it's
Hmm.
so well done and the way they control it. And when you see the fire on the ceiling or on the walls or on the floor, and you see the little spire, like the tornado, all that stuff is like, wow, how'd they make the fire a character? Like it's so well done. Beautiful.
Right.
And they make that point through Robert De Niro's Rimgate character that and I like this element. I know it doesn't work for everybody, and if you're a firefighter who watches this film, you'd be rolling your eyes and groaning. I have zero
Right.
doubt whatsoever. But as a piece of entertainment, to imply that the fire is its own kind of entity, it's alive. He says it breathes, it eats, and it hates. In a
Yeah.
really great line that he says, and the secret to beating it is not going with the laws of physics or whatever he says, but knowing that it wants to go up this jam and then across the ceiling, and that's the only way that you can beat it. I love that, and there are several moments in the film through not just the score, but the Foley effects I've got going where it makes almost like a growl as the fire
Mm.
comes towards them or rolls across whatever particular surface that it is. And I like that kind of almost mystical, supernatural element to the film. Again, I understand realistic people would not.
But yeah, it's just like Johnny says, it's an actual character. That's cool that they kind of gave it that personality. I noticed too, Paul, what do you think about this? Watching it again just yesterday, knowing what a big fan of horror movies you are, there's a horror element to the backdrafts, right? Like you can see the smoke come out from underneath
Mm-hmm.
like the doors. There's even an Evil Dead type shot. I think it's for the second guy where he opens the door and you see the wind gush, and then it shows like the fire's POV, like in
Yeah,
how
rushes
Sam
towards
Raimi.
him.
Yeah, it does like that same shot where it attacks him and he screams. What do you think about any? Did you like those horror elements for the fires?
Yeah, I do. Again, I think that's probably another reason why the film speaks to me at the level that it does. That it's not just this action film. It's not just about her. It's implying that fire is this, as I'm saying, this beast, this entity that wants to destroy anything and everything that it can, and that works for me. You can add that element to a film it's rare that I'm going to think it doesn't work.
Right. John, did you have any thoughts on the horror stuff, horror kind of
Um,
filmmaking?
I mean, I can see it now that you say it, but I didn't really think about it while I was watching it. But yeah, I can see that.
It's kind of a little bit of everything, right? And it's part of adding that character. So the other thing I don't want to just like say a bunch of go off on a whole tangent and then ask, well, what do you think the same? I don't want to have you just go, well, I don't really have anything to add. I want to basically talk about maybe some stuff that I haven't thought about, Paul. But just to mention the thing that I love about movies, I love when a movie shows us like a world that we're not familiar with,
Mhm.
right? Like the firefighters, that's a world that I've never been a firefighter. I don't know how they work, right? The camaraderie between the firefighters, the you go, we go model that they have is very inspirational, especially when you see it in
Mhm.
that first firefighting sequence. I love when Brian rescues the mannequin and Axe brings it back during their lunch. I like that. I think that's my next favorite part is I like seeing that camaraderie between the fight. It really sells them as a working unit and as a family. Paul, were there any elements of the movie besides the music and besides the fire that speak to you? You mentioned a couple times that this movie speaks to you in a certain way. What are some of the things that stand out for you?
Probably, and this is probably getting a little bit personal, but probably that relationship between the brothers, in that it's eerily similar in some ways to my brother and Mai's relationship, that I am the Stephen, he is more the Brian, if you will. And almost in terms of not being firefighters, obviously, but almost in terms of how it played out. And not that I raised him and my dad was around and the likes, and not to play it like that, but I was old enough that he sort of looked up to me, and he was a pain in the ass, that younger sibling sort of scenario. And we weren't close at all through our childhood, and we certainly weren't close when I watched this particular movie. And it's only probably in the last 10 or 15 years we've become close and supportive again and can reflect upon all this stuff. But at the time, I remember it striking a chord, like I need to be a better brother if I can, and he needs to listen to me more as well, because there's that sort of thing playing out here. Stephen's trying to tell Brian, you're not going to work. You're not going to work as a firefighter. It's going to get you, and I can't let that happen. Not after what happened to Dad. And Brian's like, just let me live my life, for crying out loud. So it wasn't that so much for my brother and I, but it was, he had a lot of trouble as a youth sort of finding his place in the world, if I can put it like that. And eventually he did, and he's done well for himself. But at that time, he was quite disaffected and negative person, and didn't want to listen to what anyone else sort of had to say to try and help him. Although he would probably say people didn't see the distress that I was going through. So when they connected, he sort of says, "That's my brother. God damn it! That's a real punch in the gut moment for me."
Well, what's great about that is it's the personal, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of the things that didn't work for me. I don't know if it's the writing. And by the way, it's Gregory Wyden. I think that he wrote the screenplay. He was actually a firefighter, but he also wrote Highlander. I thought that was very interesting.
Huh.
He's the one that created
Okay.
that world. But the brother thing I was watching it this time, like some of the arguments that they were having especially after that first fire where Steven comes out and I told you to stay right freaking side me, like he's getting so upset. And I was watching it going, why are you so upset? I don't understand what the big deal is here, right? But then I backed off, and the note I have is like, I didn't grow up with brothers. Like, so maybe I'm just disconnected from this. I don't understand. There's something that's built in that intrinsically with these two guys that I'm not getting. So hearing you apply that personal, Paul, with you and your brothers, this is what makes movies great, right? It's all about the personal. Like, I can't say that those parts are awful because they worked for you, if that makes any sense, right? That hit
Yeah,
you, it struck a chord.
not the whole thing. There are certainly moments where you're like, yeah, it's a bit over the top and the like. But I do understand at that moment that Stephen felt like if Brian had have stepped another few steps, he could have been killed. And
Yeah.
it's really him saying, I'm really worried. And he's doing a terrible job of it, because they're two men in the early 90s who are trying to communicate about feelings, and they're doing it, as I say, poor effort at it.
Right.
But it's the idea that he cares, and it's I feel responsible, and I can't let you die the way Dad died. That resonates.
Awesome. And that's what we love. Jonny, what about you? You've obviously got brothers. Did you have an understanding of the McCaffrey dynamic here? What were your thoughts on that and how, like applying the personal?
Well, yeah, I have an older brother and younger brother, and I can understand that because I know my older brother was very protective of me, and I was of my younger brother, and so I can understand like when their lives in danger, you are going to get kind of upset if they disobey you or they don't do what you told them to do, because like you say, their life's on the line. So I can understand that. However, I will say this: your side too, Darren, where you say like it seemed kind of like out of nowhere or not really. There wasn't anything really behind it. I thought like it was just him yelling at him, and that was my problem with the whole. This is probably my biggest critique of the whole movie. Is just that these two, this relationship, didn't really feel like there was that brotherly bond. I didn't really feel it. Maybe if it was Alec Baldwin playing Kurt Russell's part, I would have believed it. But no, I just didn't really feel it the whole time. I kept thinking, well, where's the actual bond? Like, and so when he dies at the end, I didn't, it didn't hit me. I didn't cry. I didn't get emotional. And I usually cry at these kind of movies. So like, I was waiting for that big moment. I didn't, never felt it. But I can understand as far as the writing goes and maybe why it was acted the way it was acted. But I think maybe it could have been held back a little bit and maybe been more impactful. I don't know.
Interesting. Well, I kind of, like I said, I kind of agree with you there. Maybe if it was Alec Baldwin playing it, that would have been something different. I spoke about Tom Cruise before. Tom Cruise was actually considered for the part of Brian first and then turned it down. So it would have been Tom Cruise and Kurt Russell as brothers. I don't know if that would have worked, or how well, or if at all, anything like that. But again, we're talking about the personal. It helps having that so you can kind of understand maybe why Dan had this relationship with his brother, and it gets across perfectly. But Jonny, you and I maybe can't feel it. And I agree with you. Like some of it's not quite. I don't buy them 100% as brothers, and we'll talk about the performances anyway. But I think the track on the soundtrack, and when I say track, I think Zimmer, the original, the real score was like remixed. I think George Martin did a remix of it, where the music that you hear on the original soundtrack is not the same as what you hear in the movie. Later, Entrada released like an actual version of the music score, and it was like life altering for me hearing that for the first time in my headphones, anything like that. But the track I believe on the original soundtrack calls Fahrenheit 451, where it's the funeral. The part where I start crying is when you see Sean holding his dad's hat. And
Yeah.
then it shows Rebecca De Mornay as Helen, like she starts crying because of that heartbreaking scene that they have, where she basically tells him, "I can't have you in my life because I can't deal with the stress." And Steven comes back out and he's talking to Sean, and you get that Sean is wise beyond his years, and mom's crying, and Steven just wants to be there so much. So that's what gets me crying is that funeral scene. And again, I think it's just the two shots, but it's also Zimmer's music that really gets me. And without the score, like I said, I don't know how the movie would have hit me. So kind of to seek into another thing here, I mean, talking about the plot, Paul, you mentioned like some flaws. I don't want to bring this down, but I also think that it's important when you talk about movies that you talk about everything. Yeah, the music is great. Yeah, the firefighting sequences are awesome, stuff like that. But yeah, some things aren't going to work for you. What are some of but again, they're like family. Like family has flaws. You're still going to love them
Yeah.
despite those flaws.
Yeah.
But what were some of the flaws that you maybe wanted to mention? We don't have to go like bring it way down, but are there any in particular that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, look, just generally, I think the film's too long. It does spend maybe its middle act as Brian is, is he going to be a firefighter? Is he not going to be a firefighter? And he starts working with Rimgate, and I mean that whole obviously the arson and the murder thing is very important to the overall plot. And I really like in the few scenes we get Robert De Niro. I think I liked his performance. He's still bought in at this point in his career. He's obviously one of the greatest actors of our generation,
Right.
or his generation, and the generations to follow. But so somewhere around about 2000, he checks out and just starts taking paychecks, and this is well before then.
Right.
So I like that stuff, but there feels like there's a lot of scenes of kind of look at they probably didn't need three people to be killed. Two would have been enough to sort of have a link between them, and then of course Seagrave, or whatever, he's not Seagrave. What's JT Walsh's character's name? The alderman Swayze.
Yeah.
Swayze,
Yeah.
that's it. Thank you. Swayze is target. That would have been enough, I think. At 137 minutes, it's too long. Yet the area where I think it suffers the most is in its female characters. Like they're almost completely secondary, and Jennifer Jason Leigh sleeps with Brian, dumps some information on his doorstep, and drives off, and we never see her again. The Donald Sutherland character, it's a nice kind of moment. It's interesting enough. He's a good performance in his two or three scenes, but it really doesn't add much. We could have had a moment between Rimgate and Brian where they connect the dots that who doesn't love fire, but is doing these things. Oh, it's a firefighter. That would have been plenty sufficient, yet we had to have 10 minutes dedicated to him just talking in riddles and the like. And yeah, so a film could have been tightened up. It could have been written as female characters better. And again, Rebecca De Mornay, all she does is react to Stephen, really. She doesn't really get any arc of her own. So that'd be my downbeats of the film.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna come back to the performances, absolutely. But Johnny, what are some of the things that you wanted to mention? you you were giving me some hints of stuff that were kind of funny to you.
Yeah, I mean that's he actually kind of touched on them there. Those were the things. Two of the major things were the fact that Rebecca De Mornay and Jennifer Jason Leigh were just throwaway characters. I thought, like, I felt like they didn't need to be those A-list actors in those
Hmm.
roles. I could have done without them. Also with Donald Sutherland, I agree as well, 100%. We don't need him in that role, and maybe one scene, one scene will do it. I don't need to see him again. I fell asleep during his monologue anyway. I was kind of I got bored and fell asleep. And then what was the other thing? Jason Gedry, the other Proby, it's
Gedrick,
Tim,
yep,
right?
Yes.
yep.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
can that guy take a shower correctly or what, man? Like, how you don't have to swallow the water constantly while you're talking in the shower. It's just I kept saying, stop swallowing the water. Kept spitting
Yeah.
it out the whole time. So it was kind of funny. But I thought that was some either bad acting or bad direction.
Interesting. Well, again, with the well, I just want to, since we've already kind of touched on the Jennifer Jason Leigh and Rebecca De Mornay, they're very, very interesting actors. If you've seen any other stuff that they've been in, I know that Jennifer Jason Leigh started out in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. She was in The Hitcher, like
Yeah.
let's see, Single
Hudsucker
White
Proxy
Female.
is one of her
Hudsucker
best
Proxy.
things.
Oh my gosh. She is so good in that. Like her accent is so fun. And then just recently, I think Road to Perdition, she had a small part in that. She was very good.
Hmm.
Recently, what was she in the Tarantino movie that I don't really
Hateful
like?
Eight.
The Hateful Eight. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was really good in that. Again, she's got shades and she's got very talented. Same thing with Rebecca De Mornay, who can play villains or shady characters or layered characters, risky business, and God Created Woman. Hand That Rocks the Cradle is great.
Yeah.
Three
Yeah.
Musketeers, she shows up. They're two actresses that are very, very good, very, very, again, talented, I want to say. They can basically do anything and they can do different roles. But seeing them play these ordinary, kind of vanilla characters was weird because I'm like, this is it? Like, that's all you're giving me? I know Jennifer Jason Leigh, you've got more than just sitting on a sidewalk, like talking about your career or something like that. There's got to be something more than this. And like you said, Paul, De Mornay is basically just there to shake her head at Steven, right? That's basically all that she does. And yeah, she has the heartbreaking scene where she tells him, I can't be with you and all that. But again, it's just kind of nothing rolls. The thing that is funny for me with this movie is I think the screenplay I would actually say the screenplay isn't very good. Like it's all the like it's got weird dialogue beats. The one that makes me laugh is when after Tim gets burned and it cuts to Brian showing up at Shadow's like office and he confronts the and says, "Look, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I just want to help you catch the son of a bitch that burned Tim." I'm like, wow, that was like written like like I said, a computer wrote that, right? So some of the dialogue like doesn't really work. And I don't know, I kind of thought that the brothers storyline should have been strong enough to kind of sustain the movie. Like I don't think they needed the arsonist stuff. I get that they
Okay.
it reminded me of if you've seen Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger. They have it's
Hmm.
the story is between him and Danny DeVito and their relationship, but they throw the subplot in about a mercenary that comes in, played by Marshall Bell, and like he threatens their lives, and they have to have an action climax with him.
Because Arnold.
Yeah, yeah, Arnold. Same thing with a kindergarten cop. The whole thing can be about a cop that learns to be with these kids, stuff like that. But they have to throw in the murder stuff, which is kind of weird in a way. Three Men and a Baby. The whole movie should be about three men and a baby, but they have this weird drug running subplot that they have to throw in. I guess maybe to earn in the movie an initial $30 million, something like that. So I kind of felt like pick one. Like, is this a movie about an arsonist or is this a movie about brothers? Like, I don't know if they really tied in as well. It's either a conspiracy movie or it's a family drama, stuff like that. So that's my main drawback with the movie. I just think that the narrative is really like kind of hoary in a way. But like I said, as soon as that climax kicks in, all that fades away. Like, I'm just kind of caught up in the spectacle of it. And I get, when it's Steven holding on to Adcox and then Axe says, just let me go. And he says, he says, you go, we go. And he's basically saying, not, I'm going to pull you up. It's like, I don't have anything to live for either. So we're both going to go. And you see that register in Axe's eyes, right? I mean, that's movie magic to me. But kind of seeking over to the performances, um, what I mean, talking about Kurt Russell, Paul, what do you think about Kurt Russell in this movie? How do you think he does?
I think he's pretty good for the most part. If I was going to cast shade at one of the main actors, probably more William Baldwin. I'm not sure he really sells what he's going for in this movie. But Kurt Russell is at that stage like without sounding too over the top, what a man's man, right? I totally believed him as the maverick firefighter who's a lieutenant who's never progressed any further because he just can't get out of his own way. He just thinks he knows better all the time. There's a moment in this film when he's playing drunk at that party and he 3 times he goes back at the guy. I
It's really
love that
funny.
scene because the
Yeah.
third time round it's like, yeah, okay, it's over and he's walking away. But his timing of it is perfect when he suddenly goes back at him again. There's another element when he's really emotional and his cheeks quivering. I'm like, how do you do that?
Oh, yeah.
How do you do that? That is one of the great moments of acting, I think, in a film like this that I can recall.
Yeah,
Isn't
that's
how
when
he's dangling
fighting.
from the thing, holding Scott Glenn's hand,
Or
right?
when he's
Yep.
fighting, when Tim gets burned and like
Yep.
and Brian's like, "You burned him, Steven," and gets punched,
Yeah.
and then
In the
they're
hospital.
they're separating him, and Steven is like trying to go, and his cheeks are. I'm like, holy crap. I think Kurt Russell is probably my favorite performance in this whole movie. I just like you said, Paul. He sells like the bravado. He sells the cowboyness, the photo behind me, and like that. I buy that he's a firefighter, and
Yep.
behind the scenes, he loved that. He really got into it. He loved doing his own stunts, things like that. The firefighters that were helping him were really impressed by him. I just think that he's got the energy. I think he's got the tough guyness. I think he doesn't hit a, and even when the dialogue kind of fails him, like when Brian first goes to see him at his boat, and he's like, "Look, I know how you felt when I quit," and Russell just really. You know how I felt. I mean, that's the line itself is like really weak and it doesn't make sense, but Kurt Russell sells the hell out of that line, and it's just the same with everything. Johnny, what do you think about Kurt Russell?
Well, I like him as an actor. I will say that I do think he's probably the best in this movie as far as performances go. But again, it's the script that even though there are moments that are decent, it's like it's not as good as it could be. And I agree with you that even though he's a talented actor, it falls flat sometimes because of the script.
Well, it seems in a way that Howard was like I really want to do the act. You can tell that that's where his heart is. He has the
Yeah.
family story, but it's really he wants to do the fire stuff, which is where the movie really delivers. William Baldwin, you both have already mentioned it. He's fine. I think this might be his best performance, which might be sad to say. I like him a lot, you know what I mean? And he's but yeah, I don't know if I think he sells the moment at the end where he finally grabs, he sees the fire and he's all of Rimgales or whatever his thoughts are going through, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna tame this thing, and he grabs the hose and he gets his brother out, and he earns that moment where Steven says, "That's my brother, god damn it," you
God
know, right?
damn it.
That really that sells it, so I like that. Johnny, what about you and William Baldwin?
Well, I like him. I think he's fine. I agree with you. It's probably his best. I do like him in Flatlanders a lot. I think he's good in that one.
Oh,
But
right.
I actually met William Baldwin. I worked as a location manager on a movie called The Humble Pie, and he was
Nice.
really easygoing, good, easy to get along with, and wasn't the best performance in that movie, but he was still, a decent actor. He's decent.
Right. Again, we don't need to go through every actor, but just my other two favorite performances, and I'll get your guys' opinion on here too, is I really like Scott Glenn in this. Like Scott Glenn is a stalwart. Scott Glenn is I just whenever he shows up in a movie, I'm like, oh, I know this guy, whether it's a
Mhm.
Bourne movie or whether it's Silence of the Lambs, where him as Crawford he's great. He's great in that. Hunt for Red October, which oddly enough, he starred with Alec Baldwin in that one. So there's a little tie in there. But I really like him in this role. He sells that fatherly role. I love that he's the kind of he takes control of the firehouse when they're having lunch and he's just saying, railing off all these jokes about wanting the strong desire to transfer all that stuff. I really like Scott Glenn. And then my question for actually, let me come back to that. I want to talk about Robert De Niro, but Paul, what do you think about Scott Glenn in this?
Yeah, he does what he needs to do. As you say, he's one of the great consummate character actors that did the rounds. Like, I don't know if he ever starred in anything that was mainstream, but he's always that bit part and Scott Glenn, and he really made a name for himself in that
Yeah.
particular way. So, yeah, he's good. It's particularly once he's revealed to be the villain and he's kind of parading around and glaring at Brian. I'm not quite so sure about that, but I think that's more a directional rather
Yeah.
than a fault with his performance per se. But yeah, no, he's good.
Interesting. What about Johnny? You were saying that this is the only movie that this
Yeah.
is the first movie you think of when you think of Scott
Yeah,
Glenn?
I mean, I know he's been in tons of movies, and when I see him, I go, "Oh yeah, there's Scott Glenn." But for some reason, when his name is mentioned, I think of Backdraft.
Yeah,
I see his face like hanging from Kurt Russell's hand, like saying "Let me go" type thing. So,
Right.
let me
but yeah, as far
go.
as performances go, good performance. He's very solid, kind of like JT Walsh. He's also another solid actor that you want in your
Yeah,
movie. His part was so small, but it could have been played by anybody. JT Walsh will always give you that like you know,
Same thing. Yeah.
that little extra.
Yeah, JT Walsh. I think the backstory is that Jennifer Jason Leigh, he was her mentor, and so she suggested him for the part. It's nice seeing
Oh, right.
whenever JT Walsh shows up. Again, he's another guy that you're like, oh, he'll be good. He'll sell whatever he's doing, like whether he's a bad guy or a good guy or middle guy or whatever, or a corrupt guy, stuff like that. So I think Russell's my favorite, followed up by Scott Glenn, and then Robert De Niro. My note here, I wrote, is Robert De Niro slumming in this movie? Is this him just cashing the paycheck? I know, Paul, you said in the 2000s,
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't think so because that bit where he yells at the bloke and
Mm,
reduces the guy to tears. Yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, that's the Robert De Niro we know and would be scared of for sure. And he does seem to be that substitute father figure for Brian pretty well. Like it's clear by the end of their little journey together that he likes his kid and he's trying to teach him and he wants him to be
right.
good at what he's doing. I don't buy, and this might come into why you sort of, I'm not sure about him in this particular role. I don't buy the conclusion of this film and him just either one, he tacitly, or he goes along. So we never see the conversation where Brian says, oh, it was Adcock's, but let's cover it up. Or he's just satisfied with getting the alderman
So Isaac, yeah.
and that's it. And therefore he doesn't know who the arsonist was. That does not gel at all with the character that's established in this movie to me.
Interesting. Okay. Well, actually, Johnny, what about you and Robert De Niro? What do you think about him in this?
I think he's fine in this one. I will say this, like I noticed this for some reason. I'm not sure why it stuck out to me, but in that scene after he berates that young firefighter, when Brian comes in, you see him kind of like getting ready and like zipping up his pants and doing his tie and putting things on his belt loop and grabbing things from the desk. That business was like super. It was natural. It was like it seemed so believable and realistic, and I thought that's the kind of stuff that good actors can do.
Yeah.
Bad actors,
Yeah.
when they try to have business and they can't do it, it just looks like they're just faking it and they're trying too hard, and that's when it pulls you out of the movie. But when De Niro does that, he sells it like crazy, and it's like you just believe that he is this guy, that he's getting ready to go somewhere and getting, you know what I mean? I don't know. That kind of stuff's impressive to me because it's hard to do. It's hard to keep that business straight in your mind while you're doing your lines and while you're trying to give the same emotion you need to give for the scene. You know what I mean? So that is impressive to me, even though it's little. It's a little
Right.
thing, but it's still
No,
really
yeah, yeah.
I think the thing with Robert De Niro, Paul, you're talking about he's one of the greatest actors of his generation. I would probably say he gives my favorite performance of all time in Raging Bull. Just the method act, the way that he gained the weight, the anger
Mhm.
of Jake LaMotta. So anyway, I could go on and on about it. I think that's the greatest male performance of all time. So when you get De Niro in a movie, you're intrinsically you expect to get that same level of commitment and that same level of power. But the Rimgale character, it doesn't really call for that. I think I asked if he was slumming. Yeah, he's not Raging Bull level. Yeah, it's kind of an easier role for him, right? But it's all the subtle stuff that he does to sell this character. I like that he sells the mysticism. Howard says, I'm going to quote here. He says that De Niro, talking about his method acting, he met 5 different investigators. When they rolled cameras, I realized he adopted the posture of one, the attitude of another, and the cadence and command of a third. And so he implemented this in his performance. Johnny, you're right. It's like he's just tucking in his shirt. And I don't buy that he's like, okay, now I'm going to tuck in my shirt it's just what he does. He's
yeah.
just the character. So yeah, his performance isn't quite as strong as Raging Bull. What
No,
is? Right? But he gives you what is expected and he does it well. I don't know. He just sells even that silly line of dialogue, the only way to truly kill it is just to love it a little. I
love it a
think it would
little.
have come off much worse if it wasn't De Niro delivering that line.
Yep, very true.
So, okay. So basically that's really all the notes that I have. I mean, we can go about all these other little details, things like that. I like Clint Howard's little cameo. I thought that
Cameo,
was
yeah.
fun.
That's how you know it's
Um,
a Ron Howard film if you
Yeah.
weren't sure
Oh,
before.
yeah, that's
exactly.
cool.
I thought it was interesting. This is kind of my final little note before I ask you guys that there's a scene where before Tim gets burned, he takes Tim and he's feeling around for where the fire is. And he says a line, "You're so very sly, but so am I." And what's funny about that is that's actually a line from Manhunter, the Michael Mann movie with the first
Oh,
Hannibal Lecter movie. It's
yep.
Will Graham that says it, which is interesting because that's a movie and a book the Thomas Harris book, about a profiler who goes to visit a serial killer to help him catch another serial killer. So Steven says that line, and then later, to help catch the arsonist, Brian, who's a profiler slash firefighter, goes to
Hmm.
see a serial killer slash arsonist played by Donald Sutherland, consults him about how to catch another killer slash arsonist. So White End says in the back that he just had that line, he thought it was cool, but I'm like, did you just think it's cool, or did you actually put that in there because it's kind of a cool tie-in to Manhunter? I don't know. I just thought that was really neat. Paul, were there any other things that, before I get your final words, were there any other details, any other fun stuff, any other trivia that you wanted to mention? Since this is a bucket list conversation, what else were you just dying to say about Backdraft?
Just the one thing that I guess you guys might be aware of, but this spawned an attraction at Universal Studios for a lot of years. And I don't know if you guys got to check it out, but I did
Yes.
in 2002. And I remember walking through it and going, wow, they're doing something from Backdraft. And, it's not the most amazing thing ever, but I
Oh,
was
yeah.
so impressed that 11 years later, here's one of my favorite films from that era. Here I am going through an attraction at a theme park across the other side of the world. And I remember hearing some of the mutterings from people around me, because you go through in small groups into this attraction. People are like, what is this again? Where's it come
Oh,
from? What's Backdraft? Which maybe speaks to the fact this made a lot of money. It was a $40 million budget, which is astounding. I know it's 40 million in 1991 terms. It's probably 100 million now, whatever it is, but it made 150 million worldwide. So it got almost 4 times its budget back. And it was a big thing for a while. But incredibly, Hollywood took until 2019 to put out a sequel to it, which is, if you've bothered, don't. Or if you haven't bothered, don't. It's
yeah.
certainly nothing like this particular film at all, and it's all the trappings of a direct-to-video sequel, which they've just done as an afterthought. But I think it's really cool that all the way up to 2010, there was this attraction at Universal Studios for this niche film, which was big in its moment and then faded away into obscurity very, very quickly. Yet Universal were pretty proud of it and managed to build something around it. So yeah, just thought that was worth shouting out.
Yeah, that's oddly enough, Paul. That's what Johnny and I talk about in our intro to this episode. We've already talked about the attraction. So I
Oh,
love,
sorry.
again, no. It's a shared experience, right? You bringing that up again, that's awesome because you feel that same pull that we felt watching it. It kind of broke my heart that you were like, "Oh, this is from Backdraft," and somebody else was like, "What? What is this?"
Yep, a little
Because
bit. That's what it was.
yeah, I could feel that in you, and it's the same thing with me and Johnny. I'm like, yeah, this isn't like Raiders of the Lost Ark or Jaws or anything, but it's like Backdraft means something to me. I love seeing this attraction play out in front of me. I love feeling the heat. It's kind of like I'm there. I just love how you said, "Oh, this is from Backdraft." I mean, I felt that's something that you definitely want.
Yeah.
Johnny, was there any other bucket list wise? Was there anything else you wanted to say about this
I
movie?
do want to point out that I like the fact that throughout the movie he's constantly late to getting on the fire truck, and he has to like kind of run and catch it and jump on as the fires are, as it goes along. And at the end of the movie, he's finally able to get on before it takes off, and he's like, he's finally caught up to the truck and kind of caught up to his role.
Yeah.
What I mean? So I was like, okay. So I like that little touch they threw in there, and he was able to help the other probie do his up his jacket and all that stuff. You're doing it wrong, kind of thing. But I did like that.
Full circle. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, final thoughts on the movie. I'll offer mine first, then we'll go to Johnny, and then Paul will let you close out the movie here. Yeah, this movie's flawed. Yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, the balance is off because the fire sequences are really what you're watching it for, and the again the drama, the emotion doesn't really match the heights of the action sequences, right? But not every movie needs to do that. Yeah, Ron Howard's made better movies. Yeah, Kurt Russell has acted in better movies, or William Baldwin, maybe not William Baldwin, but like Scott Glenn and stuff. Anyway, it's like family. Not every movie has to be perfect for you still to love it. Yeah, we've got problems with it, but like I said, as I was writing notes, as I was critiquing stuff, as I was like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. As soon as that scene kicks in where Brian sees Axe looking down at them and he realizes my brother's in trouble, right?
Hmm.
From that moment on, I was sold on I didn't write any notes because I was like, this works like magic. And I think still at the end of the day, again, that whole climax is just a melding of everything that makes movies so fun and makes movies everything. So yeah, even though this movie's not perfect, I think it's a great experience, and I do have that nostalgia, and that my heart is with Backdraft, especially for the music. I can't thank Hans Zimmer enough for the way that it opened my mind to the world of scoring. Like, if it wasn't for this movie, I wouldn't have the same appreciation. I wouldn't own as many soundtracks as I do now. So again, that's what I love about this movie, and that's why it means something to me. Paul, like you said, I hope the people that went to that attraction were like, what is Backdraft? I hope they went home and looked for it
Yeah.
and rented it at Blockbuster or whatever, right? I hope people listening to this episode, if you haven't, again, why are you listening to an episode that you haven't seen a movie for? Watch the movie and then listen to us chat about it. But if we can make people go out and watch Backdraft like a niche movie and appreciate it, then yeah, I hope we've done our job there. Jonny, what about you? What are your final thoughts on the movie?
Well, pretty similar to you. I do think the script isn't perfect, but it's decent. I think the acting isn't perfect again, but it's well done for the most part. And I do think, like you said, Paul, it's a little bit long, so I agree with that because I fell asleep and got bored in places. But overall, it's very entertaining. The action sequences are great. I love the fire stuff. I mean, I can watch that all day because I love watching fire anyway. So yeah, I mean, overall, it's a good movie, and if you haven't seen it, check it out.
All right. Jonny, be careful. We don't want to add you to like an FBI list with you saying that you really love fire. Watch out. Paul, what about you? You're our guest. I so appreciate that you're able to come on here and talk about this and to match kind of our love and our experience for it. I can't tell you how grateful I am for that. But what are your final thoughts on Backdraft and what it means to you?
Well, let me start by saying thank you so much for inviting me on to talk about this fantastic film, and to, as you say, to especially yourself, GW, obviously loving this film for so long, and Jonny clearly coming back to it and appreciating it for the most part, as much as we've talked about its flaws. So to be able to unpack a film like this, and especially to talk about its score in such detail, Wayne, for all his wonderful traits, doesn't get scores. And anytime you listen to our reviews, I'm bringing up the score. He's like, oh, I didn't even notice it. And I'm like, oh, God, your heart. You've got way more musical talent than I've got, Wayne, and yet you don't pay any attention to what's happening with the score. It drives me insane. So this has been a real buzz for me, and it's reminded me why I love podcasting so much and why I'll probably never ever go away from it entirely. So thank you both, gentlemen, so much, and for flexing around my schedule and being able to do this late on Friday night your time. Thank you so much.
No, we appreciate you.
The film itself is one of my favorites from the 90s. We covered it, not covered it, but we talked about it. Maybe we did an episode, The Best and Worst of 1991, way back early in the day. And I remember saying on air or on recording that if this film was out on Blu-ray, I would buy it instantaneously. And it wasn't widely available, but it was available somewhere around the world. Instantly, 2 or 3 listeners said, "Hey, Paul, here it is." I bought it. I bought it straight that second. And then I went looking for it, watched it that week. And then fast forward 7, 8 years, I went looking for the Blu-ray and I couldn't find it. And I had my little sad about it because I'm like, oh, but I wanted it. So I rented it online and watched it there instead. But every time I revisit this film, I get the same strong emotional feelings. It didn't work for Jonny at the end, but it absolutely works for me. And a big part of it is that score. The action, the stunts are second to none. I challenge any film, including films up to it, these days, especially because it's not all done in camera, it's not practical, it's mostly CG, to compare to this movie in terms of what they put the actors through. I think it's absolutely astounding what they managed to achieve. And the way that it closes out, again, mentioning Hans Zimmer's score one last time, with that incredible shot coming, it's obviously a helicopter shot. There was no drones at that point in time. It would be a drone shot today. Right. Here it was a helicopter shot pulling away from Brian in that fire engine, a fire truck headed towards this fire across the river, bay, whatever it is, on the other side of the city. And the camera keeps going, eventually going through the smoke as the credits roll while Zimmer's score is playing. It is note perfect way to end what is one of my favorite films from the 90s. And yeah, I love it, flaws and all.
Cool.
Paul, thank you so much. This is a conversation that's been a long time coming. I know 500 episodes is daunting. I apologize that I haven't listened to all 500 episodes of the
please.
Countdown Pod.
Who has?
But it just gives me a whole, like when I retire, I'm going to have a whole bunch of stuff to listen to, right? But ever since listening to that Halloween episode in 2020, I'm like, I love this guy. Like if he can stick up and stand up to Jason, if they can have this tete-a-tete and like meet toe to toe and like work and like have a fun conversation without killing each other. I'm like, this guy, like again, it's weird because Jason binge movies, a lot of the friends that I've made are connected to his. I've heard people on his podcast going, I need to talk to this person. Megan Kearns, especially. I can't believe just like you, Paul, I can't believe that you're talking to me. I can't believe that Megan decided I'm friends with her. It's just this whole
It's awesome.
and Robert and just Brian Scuttle. We could go on and on. There's just this giant circle. But you being a part of that, listening to you from that Halloween episode, 2020, 5 years coming. This is like a dream come true. You keep
Oh,
thanking
thank
us
you.
for inviting you on, but it's
Yeah,
like I've wanted you on forever. I think I was just daunting because I didn't know how to work out the time differences between
it makes it
here
tough.
in
It does.
Australia. But I definitely want you back on here again. This was such an easy conversation, and I don't know. I've loved
Thank
this
you.
chat with you. It's helped me appreciate. This is what you want. It's helped me appreciate Backdraft. Just even a little bit more is great. Like at least I can understand the brother thing meaning something to you. Thanks for bringing that here. I know that none of us can have the same encyclopedic knowledge as Jason, but when we can bring like the passion to it, I just really I appreciate this conversation. I've enjoyed this so much. So thank
Well,
you.
thank you, and I'd come back anytime. And maybe, hey, where we could organize it so have you guys on to do a topic and bounce back and forth on the
Oh,
countdown one day. That'd be
we would
awesome.
love that. We would love that. John, did you have any like blowing smoke that you want to give to Paul or anything?
Well, I just want to know if I come to Australia, will I face a killer kangaroo or what's the deal there?
Probably not a killer kangaroo unless you go into the wrong parts of the bush, but you will find many large and venomous types of spiders and snakes that
Well, we covered
effectively.
arachnophobia and we mentioned that I don't like spiders, so that's a problem too.
I hate spiders, Johnny. I hate them with a fiery passion, and I struggle and had to really overcome that when I lived by myself for a few years. But
Ugh.
now I have a wife; it's her job to kill the spiders. I take care of everything.
Awesome.
You're our honorary Jeff Daniels for this podcast. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, I know that you're in semi-retirement. You're not doing the weekly episodes of the Countdown Pod. I am so excited for the slashers to come back. I don't do nearly enough reposting on that, but every conversation on that,
Oh,
the
you're
meeting of
amazing.
the meeting of the minds with you, Megan and Jason is like I don't know. I want to say unbearable, but that sounds more negative. It's just it's overwhelmingly. I can't wait for that
Thank you.
series
Thank
to
you. I'm
come back.
looking forward to it as well. Although this, the latter part of the 80s, which is what we'll be covering, is not as filled with much gold as the first part of the 80s. Let's put it that way.
Right. I think maybe Nightmare on Elm Street was the last like golden maybe movie, like 84. Maybe are there any, can you give us a spoiler? Or are there any strong contenders for beating Nightmare on Elm Street besides
No,
maybe one of the sequels?
absolutely not. I'm about halfway through what we're having to watch, which is about 45 films
Oh,
for the second season of the slashers, and yeah, nothing has come even remotely close to the high bars of that film and the Prowler and some of the other early 80s films that we covered in season one.
okay.
Hmm.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So I'm gonna ask you in the back of your mind, I'm gonna ask you like for a quote from the movie because Johnny and I always end with a quote from the movie. So I'm asking you this question, try to think about that in the back of your mind. But where can people find you if people want to kind of start up a conversation with you or find the Countdown Pod, find the slashers? How can they reach you on the interwebs?
Yeah, I think if you just search the Countdown podcast, we will come up pretty strong on top of those search engines. But otherwise, we have a Facebook listed community. I know it's a bit old school to be on just the Facebook and not the TikToks and not the Blue Sky and everything else these days. But
Right, right.
yeah, we have a Facebook listed community. You get asked a question when you come in, so we try and feed out the bots. But it's a good community of 400-500 people who, not all of which engage every day, don't get me wrong, but who will answer the call for feedback for a topic and post stuff up there that's amusing and get into discussions about film and TV and the like, which is what we always wanted when we started this podcast. So yeah, search for us there.
Awesome. Okay. Johnny, I think this concludes our 1991 series, and we're going to move on to 92. Do you already have a 92 movie picked out that we want to
Oh,
talk
okay, hold
about?
on. Look at the my list. Sorry.
No, you're okay. I'm kind of
randomly
blindsiding you with
using
this. And I'm trying to make Paul jealous that he's not going to be part of this upcoming conversation.
Robert Winch.
1992 is oh gosh, it's another Ron Howard movie,
Oh,
Ooh.
Far and Away,
okay.
and we're gonna have
Well,
some guests on this episode too. So,
Ooh.
okay, perfect. Well, Tom Cruise did turn down Backdraft, and then the next movie Ron Howard
and
did
Clint
was Far and
Howard's in
Away.
Far and Away too. So we'll see Clint Howard
Yeah,
again.
all right. All right, that sounds like fun. That'd be a good way to kick off 1992. Again, anybody that has, you should already be a fan of the Countdown Pod. You've got 500 episodes to catch up with. Listen to Paul, listen to Wayne. Find like the binge movies episodes. Find the slashers whenever Paul is on. Anybody that can give Jason a run for his money is gold in my book.
Thanks
And
again.
so,
That's
Paul, you are
amazing.
Yeah, so please check you out. So again, we're going to conclude this conversation we'll see you next time with Far and Away, but until then, I'm Darin.
I'm Jonny.
And you burned him, Stephen.
You go, we go.
You see that glow flashing in the corner of your eye? That's your career dissipation light. It just went into high gear.
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul, so much. We'll see you again soon.